The moment my niece threw her drink on my birthday outfit, everyone at the table laughed. My own mother smiled. My sister didn't even apologize. Then my 17-year-old niece looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Now you look as cheap as you really are." For a few seconds, the entire restaurant went silent. Everyone expected me to cry, argue, or create a scene. But I didn't. I simply smiled, because they had no idea what I had discovered that morning. They had no idea that the credit card my sister used for years, the one paying for her luxury lifestyle, was connected to me. And that night, while they were still celebrating my humiliation, I made one phone call that changed everything. The next morning at 7:50 a.m., my niece woke up to something she never expected. Before we continue, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, let's dive into today's story. My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a marketing designer in Seattle, Washington. For most of my adult life, I was the person my family called when they needed something. A last-minute favor, an emergency payment, help with a bill, or someone to fix a problem they created themselves. And for a long time, I convinced myself that was what family was supposed to be. I grew up believing that love meant showing up, even when nobody showed up for you. I thought being the responsible one was something to be proud of. I thought if I kept helping, kept forgiving, and kept staying quiet, eventually my family would see my value. But I was wrong. My older sister Jessica had always been the golden child in our family. She was the outgoing one, the one everyone noticed when she walked into a room. My mother loved telling stories about Jessica's achievements, her personality, and how special she was. I was different. I was the quiet daughter, the one who worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and figured things out on my own. Nobody called me special. Nobody celebrated my sacrifices. They just expected more from me because they knew I would always handle it. Jessica's daughter, Emma, was raised the same way her mother was. She was smart, confident, and honestly, she could be charming when she wanted to be. But she also learned very early that people would excuse her behavior. If Emma was rude, people laughed. If Emma crossed a line, people called it being young. If I reacted, I was told I was too sensitive. Over the years, I became the person quietly helping Jessica whenever life became difficult. I never announced it. I never asked for praise. I just did what I thought a good sister should do. But somewhere along the way, my kindness became something they expected instead of something they appreciated. That's why, on my 29th birthday, I decided to do something different. I bought myself a beautiful outfit, reserved a table at my favorite restaurant, and invited the people I thought mattered most. I remember standing in front of my mirror that evening, looking at myself and feeling proud for the first time in a long time. I had no idea that by the end of that night, the dress I was so excited to wear would become the reason I finally stopped letting my family walk over me. When I arrived at the restaurant that evening, I honestly believed it was going to be one of the rare nights where I could simply enjoy myself. The table was decorated with small candles, flowers, and a birthday card sitting beside my plate. The restaurant was warm and beautiful, with soft music playing in the background and people laughing around us. For a moment, I felt happy. I looked around the table and saw my family sitting there, and a part of me hoped maybe things were finally changing. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe my birthday would not turn into another reminder that I was always the one giving and never the one receiving. But within the first 30 minutes, I started noticing the little things. Jessica barely asked how I was doing. My mother spent most of the conversation talking about Emma's latest achievements, how she was getting better grades, how popular she was, how everyone loved her. And Emma sat there scrolling through her phone, occasionally looking up at me with a small smile that never felt genuine. Then she looked at my dress. "Is that really what you chose to wear for your birthday?" she asked. The table became quiet for a second. I laughed lightly, hoping she was joking. "I like it," I said. Emma tilted her head and smiled. "It's just, I thought you would wear something nicer. You always say you're doing so well." I felt my cheeks get warm, but I ignored it. That was something I had become good at over the years, ignoring things that hurt. I changed the subject and tried to enjoy the evening. A few minutes later, the waiter brought drinks for everyone. I was talking to my mother when suddenly I felt something cold hit my dress. For a moment, I didn't even understand what happened. Then I looked down. My entire outfit was covered with a dark stain from Emma's drink. The restaurant seemed to go silent. I looked up, expecting shock, expecting an apology, expecting someone to say, "Emma, what did you do?" Instead, Emma just stared at me, and then she smiled. "Oh my gosh," she said. "Now you look as cheap as you really are." I couldn't believe what I had just heard. My own niece had humiliated me in front of everyone on my birthday. But what hurt more was what happened next. My mother looked at my ruined dress, then looked at Emma, and she laughed. "Olivia, don't make such a big deal out of it," she said. She was just joking. Jessica didn't apologize either. She just shrugged and said, "You know how Emma is." That was the moment something inside me changed. Because it was never about the dress. It was never about the drink. It was about realizing that the people sitting across from me were comfortable hurting me because they believed I would always forgive them. I looked around the table, took a deep breath, and smiled. Not because I was okay, but because for the first time, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked away from my own birthday dinner. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. That surprised me more than anything. A few years earlier, something like this would have destroyed me. I would have spent hours wondering what I did wrong, replaying every word, trying to figure out how I could make things better. But that night was different. I stood in my bedroom, looked at the stained dress hanging over a chair, and realized something I should have understood years ago. I was not hurt because of a drink being thrown on me. I was hurt because I finally accepted that my family didn't see me the way I saw them. To me, they were my family. To them, I was a resource, someone they could call when things became difficult. Someone who would quietly solve problems without asking for anything in return. And the truth was, I had allowed it for far too long. For years, I had been helping Jessica in ways nobody knew about. When she was struggling after losing her job, I covered her rent for several months. When Emma needed expensive school supplies and activities, I paid for them. When Jessica's car needed repairs, I handled the bill because she told me she was going through a difficult time. I never told my mother. I never told friends. I never expected a thank you, because I believed family helped each other. But somewhere along the way, helping became an obligation. Jessica stopped asking if she could borrow money. She started assuming I would handle things. The worst part was that I didn't even realize how normal it had become. I had a separate credit account that I allowed Jessica to use for emergencies. It started years ago when she was struggling, and I wanted her to have a safety net. But over time, that safety net became a lifestyle. Dinner reservations, shopping trips, luxury purchases, things that had nothing to do with emergencies. I noticed the charges, but I ignored them. Every time I thought about bringing it up, I convinced myself that confronting my sister would create unnecessary drama. So I stayed quiet. Until my birthday. Until my niece looked me in the eyes and insulted me. Until my own mother defended her instead of me. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I opened the account statement and looked through every transaction. For the first time, I wasn't looking at it like a sister. I was looking at it like someone who finally respected herself. And what I saw made my decision much easier. I wasn't going to punish Jessica. I wasn't trying to hurt my family. I was simply done paying for people who didn't even value me. And before I went to sleep that night, I made the choice that would change everything. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For a few minutes, I just stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. Part of me was still hoping I would wake up and realize the birthday dinner had been a bad dream. But it wasn't. The hurtful words, the laughter, the way my mother looked at me like I was the problem. All of it was real. I walked into my home office, opened my laptop, and looked at the account one more time. For years, I had been afraid of this moment. I was afraid that saying no would make me a bad sister. I was afraid that setting boundaries would make me selfish. But then I asked myself a simple question. If I stop helping tomorrow, would they still treat me the same way? And deep down, I already knew the answer. So I made the decision. I removed Jessica's access to the credit account. I didn't send an angry message. I didn't write a long speech. I didn't insult her. I simply made the change and sent her one short text. "Jessica, I think it's time you start handling your own responsibilities. I won't be able to continue covering expenses anymore." That was it. Within 5 minutes, my phone started ringing. Jessica. Then again. Then again. I watched the screen light up, but I didn't answer immediately. For once, I wasn't rushing to fix someone else's problem. Eventually, I picked up. "Are you serious?" Jessica said before I could even say hello. Her voice wasn't sad. It wasn't apologetic. It was angry. She told me I was being dramatic. She said I was ruining things over a little joke Emma made. A joke. That word hurt more than I expected. Because to them, everything was always a joke when I was the one being hurt. I calmly told her this wasn't about one night. It was about years of feeling disrespected while still being expected to help. She laughed and said, "Wow, Olivia, I never thought you could be this cold." That sentence almost made me laugh. Cold? The same people who had ignored my feelings for years were suddenly shocked when I finally protected them. Then my mother called. She said I was embarrassing the family. She said families should support each other. And that was when I finally said what I had been holding inside for years. Supporting someone doesn't mean allowing them to hurt you. There was silence. For once, nobody had an answer. And in that quiet moment, I realized something important. I wasn't losing my family by setting boundaries. I was finally finding myself. The next morning, I woke up expecting another day of uncomfortable silence. I thought maybe Jessica would ignore me for a while. Maybe my mother would send a few angry messages, and eventually everyone would move on. But I was not prepared for how quickly everything would change. At exactly 7:50 in the morning, my phone started ringing. It was Jessica, then my mother, then Jessica again. I looked at the screen and already knew something had happened. When I finally answered, I didn't even get a chance to say hello. "Olivia, what did you do?" Jessica shouted. Her voice sounded completely different from the night before. The confidence was gone. The attitude was gone. For the first time, she sounded worried. She told me Emma had woken up and tried to use the card connected to the account. The payment had been declined. Apparently, Emma had plans with her friends that morning and expected everything to work like it always did. But this time it didn't. And that was when Jessica realized I wasn't threatening to make a change. I had already made it. She started blaming me immediately. She said I was humiliating her daughter. She said people would think their family was struggling. She said I had no idea how much damage I was causing. I listened quietly, because what she called damage was actually just the moment they had to face reality. For years, I had protected them from consequences. I had stepped in before problems became serious. I had paid bills before they became emergencies. I had fixed situations before anyone else even noticed they were broken. But the truth was, every time I saved them, they became more comfortable depending on me. And every time they disrespected me, they became more confident that I would stay. Not anymore. I told Jessica, I didn't take anything away from you. I simply stopped providing something that was never guaranteed. She went quiet. Then she said something I will never forget. "You're really choosing yourself over your family?" I looked around my apartment, at the peaceful life I had built, and realized how strange that question sounded. Because I had spent years choosing them. I had chosen their problems, their emergencies, their comfort, their happiness. And somehow nobody noticed when I was the one hurting. So I answered honestly, "Yes, Jessica. For once, I am choosing myself." There was silence on the other end, and that silence told me everything. They weren't angry because I had hurt them. They were angry because I had finally stopped allowing them to hurt me. A few days after my birthday, my mother asked me to meet her and Jessica. At first, I almost refused. For years, every conversation with them ended the same way. Somehow, I always became the person apologizing. I became the person explaining why I was hurt. I became the person trying to keep the peace. But this time I decided to go. Not because I expected an apology. Not because I thought they would suddenly understand everything. I went because I wanted to finally say the things I had been carrying for years. We met at a small cafe near my mother's house. Jessica looked tired. My mother looked disappointed. Not sorry. Disappointed. As if I had broken some unspoken rule by finally standing up for myself. My mother was the first to speak. She said she didn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of one little incident. And that was when I realized they still didn't understand. So I calmly told them the truth. It was never just the drink. I reminded them of every time I showed up for them, every bill I paid, every problem I solved. Every moment I ignored my own feelings because I thought that was what family meant. Then I looked at Jessica. I was your sister, not your backup plan. The room became quiet. For the first time, neither of them interrupted. I told them I wasn't angry because I wanted revenge. I was hurt because I spent years trying to earn love from people who should have given it freely. My mother looked down. Jessica didn't say anything. And maybe they didn't completely understand that day. But I finally did. I understood that protecting my peace wasn't selfish. It was necessary. And sometimes the hardest person to choose is yourself. After that conversation, things with my family were never the same. And honestly, I stopped trying to force them to be. For years, I had believed that if I gave enough, helped enough, and stayed patient enough, people would eventually appreciate me. But I learned something important. You cannot make someone value you by constantly proving your worth. You have to value yourself first. The months that followed were not always easy. There were moments when I questioned myself. Moments when I wondered if I had been too harsh or if I should have ignored everything like I used to. But then I remembered how I felt sitting at that birthday table. Alone. Embarrassed. Disrespected. And I realized that going back to the old version of myself would mean abandoning myself all over again. So I focused on my own life. I traveled more. I spent time with people who genuinely cared about me. I invested in my career and built a future where my happiness wasn't dependent on anyone's approval. Slowly, I became comfortable setting boundaries. I learned that saying no did not make me cruel. It made me honest. My relationship with Jessica became distant, but healthier. We weren't pretending anymore. There was no fake closeness built on expectations and guilt. And my mother eventually understood that I was no longer the daughter who would stay silent just to keep everyone else comfortable. Looking back, that birthday wasn't ruined. It was the day I finally stopped accepting less than I deserved. Because family is not just about who shares your blood. Family is about who respects you, supports you, and loves you without making you earn it. And sometimes, choosing yourself is the first step toward finding the life you were always meant to have.